Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wild Woman Podcast. And I have Áine Fortune with me today. And I'm really excited to have her on the podcast. I'm going to start by just reading a line that I read in her bio, and I just loved it. It just touched me deeply. She talks about being a rememberer on a journey to remember herself whole. And when I read that, I just felt that is me. I just feel that is the journey I am on. And I think many of us are on. We're maybe starting, getting ready to start. Maybe we're in the middle of it. But I think it's just a beautiful description. And I met Áine a couple of years ago at an event in Doolin in County Clare. And we haven't physically met since then. We haven't spoken since then. And I started following her writing, and I'll put all her details in the description box at the end, but I started following her writing on Substack. If any of you haven't heard of Substack, it's an independent platform really for writers to speak and write freely and share. And I found as I started to read her writing that I felt like it felt like I was meeting myself, is the only way to describe this. And I can remember sitting at a hospital appointment with my mother, waiting in the waiting room, reading one of them, going, "Oh my God!" Like I found it, just found this connection with someone who gets me, and I think that's why this journey is so powerful. And I'm so delighted to have Áine on the podcast. I will let her speak shortly, but it's because I think so it as more of us go on this journey and connect with ourselves and each other, this is how we create new worlds and new ways of living and new ways of being. It's really coming home to ourselves, because then we meet each other. That is my experience, and that's what I felt like in meeting Áine's writing. It's quite simple. I was meeting that place in myself, in her, through her writing. And Áine is the creator of Embodied Soul. And she said it's her offering to the world through somatic movement and words. And she works, I suppose, as a guide. I let Áine talk about this herself, offering clues to people to help them on their connecting with their own memory of who they are. And I think that is so beautiful. To me, it's summed up as intuitive living. That's how I sense it when I sort of read and listen to her words. So welcome, Áine, after that long preamble. I'm so delighted to have you here.
Thank you for the beautiful introduction. I'm delighted to be here myself. Yeah, wow, what an introduction. Thank you.
Well, I am
I
just,
felt that in my heart.
oh, well, I'm going to ask you just to start with really talking about maybe where this journey of remembering started, if you can pinpoint it, and maybe if there are, particular aspects of your past that are relevant to share, maybe challenges or anything that you really sort of sparked, I suppose, that remembering that has led you to where you are now.
Well, I can quite clearly remember that it started when I was a child. I think that I know that knowing was in me when I was a child, and it was very clear for me at that stage. And I had this German Shepherd, Sasha. We used to go for walks up Bray Head in Wicklow, where I'm from. And for me, the beach was my garden, because my house was only stone's throw away from the beach. So I used to just walk down there barefoot. But I'd take Sasha for these walks up Bray Head at the time when children were allowed to do that kind of thing still without supervision. And I was probably about 10 or 11, and I'd sit on the side of Bray Head and I'd have tears streaming down my face for no apparent reason, but I didn't question it. And I look back on it now and I realize it was connection, pure and simple. It was divine connection. I knew there was no separation between me and anything else. And it felt so beautiful and so intense that it would cause these tears of joy. I had no words for it at that stage, because my family, very unusually for a 1970s, 80s family growing up in it, they were actually anti-religion, my parents. So I didn't have words for God or spirit or anything like that. I mean, God was practically a dirty word in our house. So, while my friends would have to go to mass and get the missal to prove that they'd been to mass, if I came home with the missal, my parents would, probably wonder, did I need to go and see a psychologist? So yeah, I had no words for that experience, but it didn't need words because it was so pure. And then, of course, I went to secondary school and discovered boys and alcohol and everything, and hid myself in that, or lost myself in that for a while, and forgot about the connection. I never really forgot about it because nature was always my anchor point. But I began to really sort of be presented with challenges then, and I find myself, the sea was always my anchor and touchstone in particular, partly because I live so close to it. And I never want to be far away from the sea because it always feels like home to me. But I used to stand, when I was feeling particularly challenged as a teenager, and even in my 20s, I'd stand at the edge of the sea. And again, I'd have tears streaming down my face, but these weren't tears of joy or bliss. And I'd be saying, I want to go home. Please let me go home. And the reply would always be, not yet. So even in those challenging times when I was so disconnected from myself and from, I suppose, from the world, I still could hear. I could still feel and hear what was going on. And it used to make me so sad that I wasn't allowed to go home yet. So then I was 30 when I was in Australia. I had taken, I more or less had what I view now as a bit of a breakdown in my late 20s. So I achieved very early on all the things that we are supposed to want. I had a beautiful house. I had a partner. It was a very toxic relationship, but nobody looking from the inside might have seen that, or from the outside rather. And was earning lots of money, double income, no kids, kind of, out partying, living the life, and I was dying inside. I was absolutely dying inside. And the relationship broke down, and I went to Australia when I was 29, had a year traveling around Australia, and that kind of brought me a little bit back to myself. And then I discovered the path of yoga and other spiritual teachings, and it really began to open me up to something. My 30s were still a bit of a struggle because as soon as I came back to Ireland, it's almost like it's hard to get away from that. When you come back to, always remember that Zen Buddhist thing, if you want to know how enlightened you are, go and spend time with your family. And that's what it was like. When I came back to Ireland, it was like, oh, where's all that lovely spiritual feeling gone? Because I also traveled around Asia in that year away. So then I began to dip my toes in, I suppose, to more spiritual realms again. It took a long time, and it was really then through my journey with infertility, my epic fertility journey, that ultimately ended without fruit, I suppose you would say, in that sense, but was very fruitful in other ways, because it forced me into knowing myself and why I'm here. So, and I realize now, looking back, that it was not mine to have a human child in this distance, but to be a mother of many in different ways. That's actually what I went to see a Vedic astrologer as part of my fertility journey, which sounds odd, but all I wanted to know was I going to have a child? And he he was looking at my chart and he said, chart is phenomenal. It's off the Richter scale phenomenal. You could do anything with this chart. And I said to him, am I going to have a baby? And he said, genuinely perplexed, he was like, with a chart like this, why would you want to? And I looked at him and I said, only a man could possibly ask me that. And he said, no, I don't mean it like that, but you've been a mother in many lives. You don't need that experience in this life. But I don't know if you've ever had the craving for a child and the ability to have one, but it was almost a physical pain with me at that stage. And of course, my heart knew different. My heart knew what I needed, and that's not what I needed on this journey, because I wouldn't be on the path I'm on now if I had been successful in a child. And a large part of me knew that, but it took this a long time to accept it.
Yeah, and I mean, I can identify with so much of your story. And I remember, in terms of even, it's like nearly, it sounds like you were getting a lot of these things out of the way quickly, the job, achieve, achieve, achieve. Okay, I'm going to see if any of these are going to do it, get them out of the way nearly. And then, okay, I've got this. I can totally identify. I had a good enough career, but I never felt completely fulfilled by it. But there was a lot of things, if you looked at my life, that looked like, wow, she's got the perfect life. And I was dying inside, absolutely dying inside. I just said, this cannot be it. I went on a bit of a journey with fertility as well. And I remember a woman saying to me, a healer I worked with, and she had said, look, it's something to that effect, that in this lifetime, it's not necessarily about you being a mother to physical children, but more there is another way to be a mother, and a different, and I didn't fully understand it, but like you, maybe, I think, well, I don't know, I felt maybe this pressure of I need to try and fit into this world, because the world that I remember as a child doesn't seem to be available to me. So I'm going to do all of these things and see if they work. And I still was dying inside. And some part of me, I think, in my heart and soul, knew this isn't your path. That I have to say, maybe not in the same way, I didn't feel this huge hunger for a child. I did on one level to fit in and maybe be part of, this is what makes me complete. And that's what I love about you talk about in your story when I read about it, this returning to being whole, because what it sounds like is, which I think all of us desire, is this feeling of being whole again. But our society conditions us to believe that to be whole, this is what being whole is: get the job, get the house, get the husband, get the children, and there's nothing wrong with all of those things. They're beautiful if they're part of your life. Was there something, so through that fertility journey and then coming out, was there a moment where you just felt, you said your mind and everything, what was there a moment that sort of was, okay, yeah, this isn't, I'm meant to be on a different path? Like, can you?
I think in my heart, I knew all along. And part of my wanting a child as well was because I was so goal oriented. It was it was the way I was brought up as well. About achievement, and the idea of success. And now, in saying that, I mean, it's not like my parents pushed me in any way. They always said, just always do your best. But there was always this. My mother was a high achiever, and so it was. I sort of felt the bar was high, but then it became my own bar that I was setting. But there was, I suppose. So for me, part of wanting so desperately to have a child was, why can't I do this one thing that other women can do so easily? Because all my life, I knew if I worked hard, I could have whatever I wanted. I could achieve whatever I wanted. But this was something I was confronted with that was the opposite. The harder I tried, the more elusive it became. And so it made me want it more. Because that was the ego part of me. It was the mind part going, no, if I say I want this, I can have it. I just have to try harder. And I got to the point where I would have done headstands in, like, you know, rush hour traffic on the M50 if I thought it was going to get me pregnant, because I thought, I can do this, I can make this happen, I can control this. And so that was the unraveling of me. It was the realizing, I can't control this. I can do all these things. I can do everything the nutritionists are telling me to do. I can do everything the acupuncturists are telling me to do. I can do everything the books are telling me to do. All the endless online forums. I can do everything they're telling me to do. But ultimately, I don't have control over this. And that made me feel so insecure. And so it was that realization then eventually that made me stop and think, well, if I can't control this, what else can I not control? And maybe it's not about controlling my life. Maybe it's about getting out of my own way and allowing it to flow. But there was a pivotal, what's the word? I would call it an instant, but it wasn't an instant. It was just an interaction, really. And I wrote about this in my Substack as well. I was in a shop, and red was my color. Red was, you know, I looked good in red. People complimented me in red. I loved wearing red. I loved the color itself. It's just so vibrant and full of life, full of blood. And I always wore red. And my wardrobe was full of red in the winter and full of blue in the summer, blue and orange. It still is to a large extent, although the red has changed a bit now to pink and purple. But I met this woman this stage when I was wearing red all the time. I was in a shop. I picked up another red dress to look at. And this was after my husband said to me, would you consider buying any color other than red? You know, and this woman, I could see her. She was about 90, I'd say, certainly late 80s. And she was on a Zimmer frame kind of thing. She was making her way over to me. No, she wasn't on a Zimmer frame, it was a walking stick, I think. She was making her way over to me really slowly in the shop. And she said to me, red's not your color. And I looked at her and I said, no, red is my color. Like, and I was wearing a red jacket. I had a red jacket in my hand ready to buy. She said, purple is your color. And I said, no, purple looks awful on me. It makes me look like I've got really black rings under my eyes. And I laughed, and she said, you know, you'll begin to understand purple is your color. You'll start wearing purple. And then she walked away. And I'm left there with the dress in my hand going, what's that all about? But again, some part of me knew that what she was saying to me was, your bleeding years are passing. You're entering your wise woman. Just accept it. I'd never met this woman before or since. And I'm convinced, I'm absolutely 100% convinced, she was the Cailleach, she was the goddess come to me to say, come on, time to get on with it now. Just accept where you are. Just accept where you are. And she was sent to me in embodied form. Like she actually looked like a witch. She'd really like long grey hair, and it was, you know, tied up in a bun. And she looked like she could have been made out of trees and twigs. Like she was that wizened and everything. I was just like, that was the most bizarre experience ever. But it wasn't, because that was one of those embodied experiences where you're being told very clearly, where I was being told very clearly by spirit, but in a form that I could understand.
Yes.
Okay, you've had enough tinkering around at the edges now. Stop this. Get on with what you're here for. And it took me a while longer after that. I mean, I've had times where I've railed against I have a beautiful birch tree in my garden. She is, to me, she embodies the Cailleach. She's tall and she dances in the wind. And she's the tallest birch tree out there. And so she's been my muse for years since I've been living here. And I literally stood in the garden and railed at her and screamed at her and said, if you won't give me what I want, I'm not doing what you want me to do. Like, as if. And, you know, she looks down at me as if to say, there, Good girl. Off we go now. Because we have choice in so much. We always have choice. And I could have chosen to keep railing against my purpose and what I'm here for and wasting my time. Or I could choose to do what I was here for. So eventually I got to the point where I was like, okay, you win. I'll do what I'm here to do.
Mm. But you're describing a letting go, I suppose, isn't it, that we all have to get to? And I remember that in the car as well. And it's just for anyone listening who may be going through, I just think, when you talk about clues, and it's very valuable, because it's always been very valuable to me when I hear other people speak out, maybe what I've been feeling, but feel alone in it. And it just is it's just so helpful. But I remember sitting in my car after getting the news about cancer, and I had been going, doing, achieving, and suddenly there was no more doing to be done. Like there was nothing, like you said. And I think it's more I don't think I physically took my hands off the wheel, even though I thought I did. I think symbolically I took my hands off the wheel and I went, okay. And that was when everything started to change. So it sounds like that happened with you, but also when you said as well, this is another really important part of the story, I feel, for so many of us, is then the grief that comes sometimes with the letting go, I think, is also a part of it, that we have not been giving ourselves permission to allow. Like you went out to the tree and you wailed and you roared, and you had to do that, I imagine, before you could go, okay, I'm ready now to hand this over. And like, would you describe that like, would you feel that was a part of that process? Because you were also saying, okay, I'm not going to, that's still a big thing to grieve and let go of. I'm not going to have
Oh,
that physical child.
I think the grief was there all along,
Mm.
because we all know, we all know. And I knew on some level that I was never going to have a child. So even though outwardly I was doing all the things I was supposed to be doing to have a child, somewhere in me knew it wasn't mine to have a child in this lifetime. And now I have no regret about it. I always thought I would. I didn't know how I was going to cope with the regret. But as soon as, so I had quite an early menopause, about 48, 49. And as soon as that happened, it was like, okay, here we go now. The choice has been taken away from me. And that felt like a relief. Not a relief that I didn't have a child,
Mm.
but a relief that the choice had been taken away, or the option had been taken away.
Mm.
There was no more dithering about it then. It was like, okay, so that's not happening. Now, where am I going to put all this creative energy that I've driven into having a child? Where am I going to put this now?
And what
And
happened then?
it's,
Mm.
well, then embodied soul started to come in more and more clearly for me. Because, it's been developing for many, many years, probably since I was 30. But once I made that decision that, okay, here I am, all this creative energy I have, and it's huge. Now I'm going to focus it on my purpose here. And it was like the floodgates opened. And what was it I read before? When you express your intention and desire, the universe will move heaven and earth to make that happen. And that's what it felt like. It's like, whoa, the floodgates have just opened. Everything's flowing now. And then we had this sort of the blip of not knowing what was going on in the world in 2020, 2021, and that kind of threw me a bit. But even through that, because I had so much time then to just explore my own creativity, and I could feel it just growing stronger and stronger by the day. And yeah, it's essentially what I need myself, which is to remember who I am. And that's not just remembering here, but it's remembering, it's putting back pieces of myself that I split off over the years because I didn't know what to do with them. So I also, on my epic fertility journey that taught me so much, I went to see Martin Duffy in Shamanism Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that I went to him for a soul reintegration because I knew there were split off parts of me that I just wasn't allowing in. And I thought it was to do with um, I was sexually abused as a child. And I thought perhaps that had shut me off to a whole to my creative flow, because obviously that has a lot to do with, you know, the womb and all the creative life force. And I know it has affected my sense of boundary and flow. So I I thought that's what it was to do with. And then in the end he said to me, the child you're waiting for is your creative child. And I wasn't quite sure what he meant by it at the time, but now I fully understand. And he said, she's willing to stay here with you most of the time, as long as you allow her to go back to source. And then I recognized in that my own need to, and I was saying this to you before, I'm high energy when I'm out there. I'm really high energy, but it takes me a lot of me time and alone time to recover. And that's when I connect with source, and that's when I fill my well. Now, I I know that there's another step in that process to be able to, and I think one of your previous guests, Nada,
Mm-hmm. Natalie,
Nada
yeah.
touched on this, where it's because I am so empathic, I find my own energy being drained when I'm in the world. But that's a lot to do with me as well. I throw it out there. So it's learning to harness that energy in such a way that I can still give something to the world, but not deplete myself in the process. And that's where I'm at now. That little dance of working out, and for me, that's the integration of the masculine and the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
Because all this creative feminine flow that I have, which is so boundless and so infinite, there has to be at some point where I can connect to my masculine that allows me to go, okay, here's where we're focusing right now. And we'll let the flow go on around us, but here is where we need to focus right now.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so what's true in a lot of my writing now, both poetry and prose, is that integration of the masculine and the feminine in each and every one of us. It's not about men and women, it's not about,
Mm.
it's about every single one of us being, in order to really, really, really step into our power, being able to embody the masculine and the feminine within each
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think, just because what you described earlier in your life and I've experienced is sort of operating out of this almost distorted masculine yang, do. Now I know we need to do and have action, and that's where the masculine feminine comes in. But that guest as well, what really opened was a light bulb for me when she described many thousands of years ago when women came, the sort of feminine, at this again in men and women, this intuitive side of us was the guiding light. And then the masculine side of us, or the masculine, would go out and seed that and take action. And that became distorted. So a lot of us, men, women, have ended up in this very push, like what you describe at the beginning of your life, like it just, the same, the pushing, the career, the achievement, and that's all good. But if it's not guided by the feminine, that's to me what it sounds like you're describing. And how would you describe how that's happening now for you, that sort of integration?
on the path of yoga. So for me, yoga is not something that you do on a mat.
Mm.
It's not in any way a prescription. It's a way of being. So yoga means, to me, well, one of its interpretations, and this is what it means to me, it means union.
Mm.
To me, that's the union of the masculine and the feminine.
Mm.
And so I've done many like teacher trainings and somatic movement trainings and embodied anatomy and all of that. But on that journey, I met this wonderful woman called Uma Dinsmore Tooley from the UK. And she came over here and she was doing womb wisdom weekend. I had no idea what womb wisdom weekend, or what womb wisdom was at that stage, late 30s, maybe I was 40. And I went along again because of the fertility journey, or so I thought. But I was blown wide open by that. And she speaks in her book Yoni Shakti about um, about the heart womb river. And that resonated with me instantly. And there was a disconnect in my heart womb river while I was up here. And the desire for a child was very much up here. And it couldn't go down because it wasn't my heart's desire. But I believe when something is your heart's desire and when it is for your greatest good, then that river will open up and the flow will go to the womb, cosmic womb, the womb of creation. And that's what the universe is listening to. That's what the universe is connecting into. It's source. It doesn't have to be called womb wisdom. It's source wisdom. And it's in each and every one of us, regardless of the body we find ourselves in. So when that heart's desire is unleashed into the heart womb river, it's going back to source. And source goes, yes, I'm here with you in this. This is fantastic. And it always reminds me of that. And I think I said this to you before as well. It's like when a child makes something, when a really young child makes something and they go, Mommy, look what I did. And Mommy goes, that's wonderful. And it's about all of us learning to be our own mother, in the sense that we come to know what our heart's desire is. We allow that to flow into the heart womb river. Source responds, and we create that in our lives which we want to live. And then we can say, look what I did. And it might be something small. It doesn't have to be a human child. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a piece of art. It doesn't have to be anything at all. Just look what I did. And for me, that all comes back to love. Because how can we find heart's desire if we don't come back to ourselves? If we reference ourselves by what we see out in the world and we think that's what we're supposed to want, we'll never find heart's desire. Never mind unleash it into the heart womb river. And so I suppose for me, it was in the withdrawing from the world and being more in nature. So you asked me a question there, and I was thinking about, for me, it's about embodiment. That is how we reconnect with ourselves. We are living an embodied life, and that's where embodied soul came from. It's the recognition that, yes, I am spirit, I am light, I am frequency, I am vibration, and I am living this very embodied, earthy life. If I disconnect those two, how can the heart womb river flow? It can't. There's no, it's the connection of heaven and earth. We're a conduit between the two. Masculine, feminine, and we embody the two here on earth. So if we don't come back to ourselves in some way. The way of coming back to ourselves is through this physical form. It's what we have. It is our temple.
Mm.
You know, it's what one of the name Embodied Soul, my offering to the world, actually came from a poem that came to me that is called Embodied Soul. And it says, I am not your building to burn, scaffold of bones to lay bare, a collection of muscles to toil and turn, take you from here to there. I am your temple, glorious, whole, made from the clay of the earth. You know, and it goes on in that vein. We can't pretend that we're just this. And if we do, we will become disconnected. And then there is no flow for heart's desire to go into. So, yeah, it's a constant dance between the flow and the boundary, the masculine, the feminine, and being able to hold both and understand ourselves as both. Where when it comes to the point, there is no duality, there's only the one. It's always through this physical form, nature, source, grounding, because it's all well and good to go up and out there into the realms. And that's what I was doing when I was standing at the sea when I was younger, saying, I want to go home. And Spirit was saying to me, you can come home, but not yet. You're here. And more now, I've begun to realize, actually, because I you know, I've always been into health and wellness, like even from when I was a teenager. And God, I tried some really strange things, you know. I certainly tried everything on my epic fertility journey. But the older I get, the more I realize, actually, you know what? I'm here in this body, and it's about joy, it's about pleasure, it's about love, and feeling that through my body. So really, really like being with and I think another one of your guests, Áine Isabel, touched on this as well. For me now, more and more, it's about presence. It's about bringing joy to the moment that I'm in. However that may, obviously not every moment you're not going to be overjoyed every moment, but it's about bringing presence and what can I bring to this moment, and recognizing what this moment is bringing to me. And what better way to do that than through the body we've been given? And health for me now is about joy, pleasure, and love. I actually think that the biggest indicator of happiness in anyone, or the biggest indicator of health in anyone, is happiness, is contentment. And then almost everything else doesn't fade into insignificance, but it's background to the presence that we can embody. And that is bringing spirit. It's bringing heaven and earth together. We're embodying spirit and knowing ourselves in that way.
Well, straight away, the image I get there when you're saying that is like, it's like you that joy and that love that comes across is because you're really tapped in. What is it? Is it Esther Hicks says you're tuned in, turned on, tapped in to that source? I love that saying. But you know, it's because I think for a lot of us, I was going around with the tap sort of blocked, or the flow blocked for many years. Can you talk, because this, where I think, well, I know for me and many people I meet, where the challenge can be, and we can talk about it, and you've shared your lived experience, and I think that is it. But what happened, I can say, in my own life, so what you described as a child, this connection and this joy, and I want to go back there because it can be painful to be in our bodies. And this is what I've witnessed in myself as well, is that knowing, but to get to where you're talking about and really feel that flow, and I feel it more and more and more in my life, but I had to sort of unblock a fairly sort of like a solid block of cement, I'd say, that was going on down here. I felt nothing. And then something happened to like crack open the cement, and this tsunami came out. And now it's and sort of, so in terms of reconnecting with that place that you talk, coming into the body, the joy, the source that is available despite the experiences we'll have, but they move through quicker, is my experience. How do you work with people to support them in that?
What I say is inspiral movement, living words. So, but I would just backtrack a little bit to say, if it sounds like I have everything sussed in my life, I absolutely do not by a long shot. And it is not a linear journey either. More often we can be present with the moment, and then those moments become closer and closer together. The more presence we have in our lives, the more joy we have, and the greater the gift we are to the world, because then we're freeing up our own energy to give. But the way that I see embodied soul as an offering to the world is my own movement practice. I wouldn't even call it a practice, actually. It's more about intuitive movement. It's more about natural movement. What do I do every day? Because you can like go to the gym, you can spend an hour and a half in a yoga practice in the morning, but if the rest of the day your posture is slouched, you're not walking with a gait that suits your body, your anatomy, if you're all the other things that you do, if you're not resting your eyes by looking out at nature or natural light every now and then, it's really not. It's about the things we do all the time, and it's back to the presence again. I have to remind myself hundreds of times in a day to bring my pelvis back, because my default is to have my pelvis forward, and then that affects my back, it affects my knees, it affects my legs. And like, I've been doing this for years, and I still have to remind myself, oh, there I go again. And it affects my breathing and everything. So it's about bringing presence to the moment. And how is my body in this moment? To take it out of the mind and go, oh, like, not how am I feeling, and let's think about that, but how am I actually feeling? And have I got aches or pains somewhere? Or for somebody who's in a lot of pain, can I find a point, not me, can I guide them to find somewhere, a place of comfort? And it might be your little finger, but is there somewhere in your body that is comfortable? And then maybe expand that comfort out. And I'm very wary of talking about pain, because apart from dysmenorrhea, which gave me incredibly painful periods all of my menstrual years, I've thankfully never suffered from chronic pain. So the way I got through that pain was, I knew it was only going to last a few days, and it was intense. It was for a few days. And I know people who experience chronic pain and like the way they have to deal with it. But if I was working with somebody who was like recovering from an injury or something, it's about, for me, it's about finding the still point, the point of comfort, not just in our body, but this helps us do it in our lives as well, I believe. That if we can find a place that is comfortable and expand that out, and what am I comfortable with? And then grow that. And it's also partly about doing what we love doing as much as we can. Yeah. Rather than believing it has to be a certain appointed time. Like, this is my time for exercising. This is my time for doing this. This is my time for doing this. That we see our lives as more of a flow, And obviously, yes, we need the masculine structure. We need the planning and all the rest of it. But let the planning be a part of it. And then we get to enjoy the flow more. I don't know if that's making sense, but
No, yeah.
it's about not overly structuring our lives, not overly going into the masculine where we don't have to. But if we can be present with every moment, regardless of what we're doing, or as many moments as we can in our day, and always bringing it back to the body. How am I actually feeling? Not what am I thinking? How am I feeling? So for me, it's very much because I am very somatic. Like that's how I experience the world. But I can also be very heady. You know, I very academic experience growing up. So for me, coming back to the body feels like coming home. Feels like.
And in the choice that you talked about earlier, you know, I think, and you mentioned it before to me about responsibility and self-responsibility for our lives. It strikes me that once, and I've experienced this in my life, once I was willing to start coming back into my body, because I had been out of my body, I'd say, for most of my life, and I found it quite challenging initially, and still can, like what you said. It's a dance the whole time, and sometimes I'm not, and sometimes I can come back and I find these moments of great peace, and something maybe needs to move through me. Maybe it's grief, maybe it's anger, but that seems to me where our power is, where I'm finding my power is when I come back, as you say, spirit back into the body, and then whatever is showing up, okay, that's we all have a choice in that, I suppose. Do you feel that like that is a sort of a tipping point that we all have to reach in our own way before something really shifts in our life? And I think that's before anything will shift collectively involves each of us, you know, one by one doing this within ourselves, and that ripples out. It's not about, yes, go do what you feel drawn to do in the world, but the answer isn't out there, as you've been saying. It's each of us taking responsibility for what you've described in our own lives is how we change the world. How yeah.
Self-responsibility is huge for me at the moment, partly because of everything that's been going on in the world, but also my own journey that I'm realizing more and more. I have to take responsibility. And in fact, all I am responsible for is this. I'm not responsible for anything else. And again, Isabel touched on this, but it's very hard to negotiate the world out there because you're dealing with all these other somas. So if you take soma in a sort of expanded sense, so soma is the Greek word for body. But I see soma as being consciousness, body, everything. You know, cellular consciousness. It's more expanded than just like muscle and bone, but just muscle and bone. Everything's fascia, so it's all connected anyway. But if we're constantly referencing ourselves by what's out there, we can never really know what's in here except by reference to what's out there. And so at some point, and some may never get to this, and it may not be a point. Again, it's a sort of it's a dance always. But can I take responsibility for my own thoughts, words, and actions? And that in itself is a lifetime's work. Because, you know, when something happens that triggers me, immediately I'm like, you know, I'm in there. Ego's going to protect me, and you know, it's not my fault, it's yours. And now more and more I'm kind of able to, it's being able to take that step back from what I think to be the observer of my own thoughts, because thoughts lead to words and words lead to actions. So if I can take that step back and the distance between taking the step back gets shorter and shorter. It used to take me days, maybe even weeks, before I could take a step back and go, hey, maybe there's something else going on here.
I having my moon in Aries.
Well, but it's like,
Oh,
now I am now I can go, pretty soon after the thought forms, I can go, oh look, there you go. Because it is natural to want to protect ourselves. So of course we're going to want to project onto other people instead of going, oh God, do I really have to hold this crap myself? I'd much, much rather fling it at somebody else. And in that, what I found is an ability to say, and genuinely from a heartful place, not just in my mind, okay, what in this situation is mine? What in this situation is my responsibility? And what is not? Because equally, I think when we're very empathic, we can also take on a lot of other people's shit too. So it's about going, well, you know what? I can woman up and say that part of that was mine, but that whole other part was not mine. So I'll embody this, and I'll work it through, but you can take that back. That's not mine. And do it like, you don't even have to say it. It doesn't have to be an outward thing saying to somebody, oh no, that part's yours to deal with. I'm not dealing with that. No, it's just okay. I need to deal with this part of me. And then whatever they do with that part has nothing to do with it. But it's very hard to take responsibility for oneself in the world we're living in at the moment. Because we've been taught, I would almost go as far as to say indoctrinated to not trust our body, to not trust the body of the great mother that we live on and depend on. That we can control everything. With this, no, we can't. And that's the madness we see in the world. So if each of us can learn, and I believe it's happening more and more, each of us can learn to come back here into our hearts with every situation where, ego might threaten to run away with us. And ego is not one thing either. Ego is a whole panoply of characters. And if we can bring it back to ourselves and just go, not just, it's huge, say, okay, I'll take responsibility. That's all any of us can do.
Yeah.
But if that was extrapolated out to more and more people, look how the world would change.
Yeah. But like you said, I think it's one, it's maybe, my feeling is a lot of this is all, there's like this little grid or network. It's all happening. It may not be visible in the world we're looking at right now, if you were to look at the news or whatever you want to call it. But if you were out in the world, it may not seem, but it feels like a lot of what you're describing, a lot of this shadow, whatever, that is coming up in us is coming up in the world. And I can just share what I have found, and I'm in that sort of to and fro as well, individually and collectively. And every time I go out to point the finger, at whatever, we're, this divide and conquer sort of keep us fighting all the time up here, I'm usually brought back to something in my life where that is happening. I'm sort of saying, if you're not looking at this in your life, there's no point being out there trying to sort of solve some big fight. If you're doing this with the person beside you, if I'm pointing the finger, I had an experience, I might as well share it. It's just because it's sort of relevant to this, and it was in a broader circle, and it's no great disrespect, but there was a lot of talk of community and heart and love and heart opening. And then we all sort of broke down, and a lot of people wouldn't even talk to each other. There was something I was watching, and I was going, okay, I'm feeling very triggered by this. What? And I could have gone into old stories, but I just found this really interesting that, like, like you said, it has to be embodied and pointing out to things in the world and saying there's no peace, and there's war here and this is there, but all of this starts. I don't know, that to me is the ultimate self-responsibility. And however that is triggered, I don't know. I think it is changing. You're saying you're seeing it maybe more, but it probably is going to be quite a slow trickling up from the earth, it feels like. Then
I
yeah,
think what's happening now is, my I've heard my medicine woman say before, just beware of the love and light brigade, and it's true, because it's very easy, and hands up, I've done this myself. It's a form of spiritual bypassing. It's like, oh, we'll look out there and say, how the world should be, and this is the way to do it, and this is the only way to do it. No, the only way to do it is to go in here and see what needs to be decluttered and do a little bit of housekeeping in here. And then I can turn my gaze out into the world and say, okay, well, how can I contribute to making this better? And even if it's only a teeny tiny something I can do, when in the introduction here, your beautiful introduction, you were saying how much my words resonated with you. And it's so important for me to remember that that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's to touch people's hearts. It's not about, I was saying this to you before, like, it's not about subscriber numbers or anything else. And that's why I love getting feedback from people, because I know if I've touched one heart with the words that have been given to me, then I've done my job.
Mm.
I've achieved my purpose.
Mm. Well, your words reminded me of who I was, I can just say that, and were part of the catalyst to sort of say, okay, to try to that remembering, not to nearly disregard it, to go, no, this is where you need to be, in your heart, listening here, and someone else is there. It's like I met you there, and we're all doing that. And sometimes we don't have to meet, and we don't have to yes, it's lovely to meet, but that isn't the point. And you definitely, that, I think that is the work now. That's what I feel like. If you were to say right now on the earth, what is, I mean, you've described mostly that, and if you were talking to someone and to listeners, what is the most important thing they should be focusing on now? Is that the sort of what you would?
Well, I'm trying to eliminate the words should, would, and could from my
Yes,
own
that's
life.
not a good word.
So,
Yes. What would you, yeah.
oh no, I'm just saying that for me,
Yeah, what
because
would you share about that? Yeah,
I'm I'm a devil
yeah.
for beating myself over the head with what I should, would, and could be doing. That's what I should have said earlier as well, about we need to be gentle with ourselves,
Mm,
because we are, it's like if you imagine an electrical transformer. So we are electrical beings, actually, we're energy.
mm,
But if you imagine it like a big interconnector transformer, taking, like, high voltage down to lower voltage, we are that. That's that's huge. You know, we're bringing spirit onto earth, and we're the interconnector. We're the joiner for that. That's pretty massive. So I think we need to be gentle with ourselves as well, in looking inwards and go, compassion is the key. And more I'm realizing that love is actually acceptance. All of us, I believe, want to be accepted for who we are. We want to be seen and heard and witnessed as we are, and accepted for all of it. But how can anyone else out there accept us? We can't even accept ourselves. And so it's about coming back to ourselves, but with huge compassion for our physical, uh, for our physical beingness, for our mental dilemmas, all of it. It's all part of who we are. And it's always changing. And that is the wonderful thing about being in this. We are so adaptive. We always have the capacity for change. We always have the capacity for choice. And most importantly, we always have the capacity for love. No matter how far into the world and into the matrix and into the mind game we've gone, we always have the capacity for love. And that starts here. So, yeah.
Thank you, Áine. I sort of think we're sort of coming to a natural conclusion with those words. I just think that's beautiful. Thank you for helping me remember, and I think the listeners remember. And we're all, what is it? I love those words. I think they're Ram Dass. We're all just walking each other home. And
we're
I
all
think it's walking each other home.
And when you mentioned about meeting each other, we've got to meet ourselves first, and then meet other. And Rumi's words, I can't quite remember them, so I'm paraphrasing. A field out there, or I'll meet you there. And that's what it is. We've all got to grow our own pastures and then meet together. But I just want to really say thank you to you for doing this, for bringing all of these women together. And I hope you really feel that in your heart, the power of what you're doing, because it seems to me to be a temple where you are gathering women to bring in wisdom. That is massive. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. My honor. Thank you so much for those words. Thank you everyone for listening, watching. I'll put all of Áine's contact details in the description box. I highly recommend following her Substack. Just beautiful words shared from the heart, living words. I love that. Living words. Yeah, my privilege and gratitude to you and to all you listening. Thank you so much. See you next time. Gur Mahagad. Slán.